Join me in welcoming Laura, who's going to talk on being well-rounded is a myth. Thank you, Laura. Welcome.
Thanks, Ruth. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all here. My name's Laura Drake. I go by she, her, and I'm gonna try to, this is something I feel like I could talk about all day. So I'm gonna try to rein that in a little bit because I want to talk with you guys as well. But the presentation I'm gonna do is, I use it a lot in my career working with people. I draw from a lot of different sources. Some of them I don't even remember where I'm drawing from, but I am going to reference a person named Marcus Buckingham at a certain point in the presentation. And at the end, I'm going to post a link to a video if you want to find out more about how he views this topic. So I will definitely let you know when I'm stealing from Marcus Buckingham. So basically, a well-roundedness is something we've all been told to aspire to. Like at some point in our life, somebody talks about how we need to be well-rounded, and that could be, in school, in our studies, or it could be at work. So, we might be talking about being emotionally well-rounded. And today we could talk about that in sort of any arena, the arenas I haven't even mentioned, but because I have limited time, I kind of want to focus on the world of work because it's probably where it's most clear when we talk about well-roundedness and what that means. So if we think about being well-rounded professionally, it implies, I think, for me anyway, for most people, that we're good at doing a lot of things well. If I'm a well-rounded professional, I'm good at a lot of different things, but what things, right? What are the things that I'm supposed to be good at? What are the lot of things? And in the working world, it's probably a combination of professional skills and knowledge. But what skills and, what knowledge? So would it be important, is it important that I'm, fluent in Klingon? And by the way, Kobe, I'm not. Apparently that's no in Klingon. I probably didn't say it loud enough and there's not enough spit on the screen. But so my boyfriend is fluent in Klingon and we're going to pretend that I am. So that's the best I could do, was my attempt at no, but we'll just play along, okay? What about the fact that I make a fantastic pot roast? And I do, but I can't share that with you today. Maybe someday. How about, even though I don't have perfect pitch, I can usually sing a B, because I was in high school in choir. We performed the Star Spangled Banner like all the time. And so you just knew where the B was. And I'm not going to demonstrate that right now because I have a cold. But also it was 30 years ago, so maybe I can't do that anymore. And so those are skills, right? Those are skills. But I think about, would that even be relevant to work? I'd say, except under some specialized circumstances, and it would have to be really specialized position to have all of those skills. Let's see, it might be a party planning Klingon a cappella group. Then all those skills might matter, right? But in general, no, nobody is going to care if I have those skills unless they want me to stop using them, right? So well-roundedness is kind of in the eye of the beholder. And I'm using ridiculous examples, but I want to get that idea that what's important to management is it's the context of what they want you to do, right? So, and that can change. That could be different, even in the same company, right? I could have the same position as somebody else, same job title, same job description, but we might actually use different skills for a lot of reasons. So I'm going to use the example I picked, of course, is one I use a lot, and I used it a lot more pre-COVID. So bear with me. This probably doesn't work in the world we are in now. But let's say I'm an executive assistant and I work for a vice president of a company. And she just adores me. She thinks I'm great. So I'm a whiz at scheduling. I'm really tactful but firm when I'm gatekeeping. I have a gift for using Excel, writing reports, doing budgeting. I can anticipate her needs, and I just love what I do. I love feeling important. I love accomplishing things. I just go home at the end of the day and I'm really thrilled with the kind of work that I did. But I'm also ambitious, right? And, I've been eyeing the president of the company. I want to be the executive assistant for the president. And so more money, more prestige. And eventually the position opens up, and based on a recommendation from my current manager, I get the job. But then I find out that unlike the VP I was working with, who she just works in the office like 24/7, she's just there all the time. A major part of my job is arranging travel for the president. She travels all over the country, like most of the time. So I have those job duties I'm really good at, but a huge part of my job is now scheduling, but not scheduling meetings, it's scheduling, hotel rooms and flights. I might have to do some negotiation. I've got to talk to people at weird hours of the day because my time zones are different. Other than speaking Klingon, I'm not multilingual like the guy who had my job last, right? So I may be struggling with things like translation. And that becomes a huge part of my job. And I'm miserable and I hate it and I'm bad at it. And eventually, even though I'm a good worker, it starts to affect my ability to do my work well. And so I try, and the president tries to, get me coaching or whatever the thing is, but eventually the president lets me go because I'm not doing a great job. So if you talk to my original boss, the VP, she thinks I'm amazing, right? She thinks I'm a well-rounded employee, and she just can't understand how the president of the company let me go. But the president definitely goes, she's terrible. She's not well-rounded. So again, I'm over-exaggerating, but that's that idea that the person in charge is deciding what well-roundedness means. So I have to think about what I want to do. I have to be aware of what's going to work for me. We should still be thoughtful when we're considering what we want to be when we grow up, let's say, right? We should still look into the skills that an industry requires or that a company really values and all of those things. It's a good idea to research that. We want to read job descriptions. We might want to network with people that work at a company that we want to work at. We want to tailor our resume or make our LinkedIn like focus on the things that those people are looking for. But we could do all those things good enough, well enough to get our foot in the door, but we could get it wrong enough that we can't even stay, right? Because it matters. To some degree, it matters that I also enjoy what I'm doing. It matters. I can learn skills, but if I hate the skill and I learn it, I'm going to be miserable all day long. So what we're looking for you to thrive, it's not just what the company's looking for, the industry's looking for. It's also, and not just what you bring to the table and the skills you already have, but who you are. You have to kind of know who you are and what drives you. So if we find a rewarding or stimulating job, it helps you get out of bed in the morning, right? If you're passionate about something, you're going to do a better work in general, all other things considered. I want to mention that later. We can motivate the people around us and we're less likely to burn out. So Marcus Buckingham talks about this as playing to our strengths, right? So we still have to learn skills that keep us the bare minimum so that we can do the tasks of our job, but we want to play to our strengths. And people that regularly play to their strengths tend to do better in their work and are happier overall. And that's why this is important. That's why I like to talk about this. When Marcus Buckingham is doing work, he interviews people that are good at, enjoy their jobs. And the research he's done is a little bit old, but his claim is that only about 17% of the people who are, working professionally get to regularly lean on their strengths at work. So a couple of times a week, you do something that is really enjoy, that you're really good at, that energizes you, that makes you feel good about being there. But there are ways that we can kind of go toward that. Even though the world is saying to us, be well-rounded, we can meet the minimum of whatever well-rounded is while we are still playing to our strengths. But we have to think about some other myths that we kind of have been fed, and some may or may not have. So this is where I'm going to reference Marcus Buckingham, and I mentioned him earlier. So he does a lot of work in executive coaching. He makes oodles of money selling books. He does classes. He's got a YouTube channel. I just really like the way he frames this idea of playing to your strengths. So I'm going to talk about some myths that he has come up with. So the first one is an interesting one, and that is the myth that we change as we get older. That's one. Another myth is we learn and grow the most in the areas where we're weakest. And the third one is a little more narrow, and that's going to be that if I'm on a team, I have to not focus on my strengths, but I need to just be well-rounded so that I'm able to do whatever is required of me for the team. So myth number one, we change as we get older. Well, of course we change as we get older, right? We learn new things, we experience new things, but our core personality and our core preferences, these are things that we tend to develop pretty young in our lives, right? So we're going to have things that we really enjoy doing and things we really hate doing. We may still learn to stretch, we may discover things later, but that core need, that core thing that gives me energy is likely not going to change. I'm going to talk about some exceptions, but in fact, I'm one of the exceptions. But if I'm a really shy child, right, and if I just can't stand doing public presentations, I probably shouldn't become an improv actor. This is probably not the best option for me to go into because I could probably learn the skill. They may never get me on the stage, right? So kind of knowing what kinds of things bring me energy and bring me joy from an early age is something I could think about. Yeah, I can adapt. Yeah, I can learn skills, but I'm probably going to be happiest and do best and enjoy learning the skills if I focus on things that I recognize as enjoyable, fun early on. And I, again, should still consider pushing myself in other directions, but I might want to not consider taking a job. Here's how I would explain to some people. If I know that I'm really an impatient person, I probably should not look into a career in daycare, because I can learn skills about how to be more patient with children, but I'm going to hate it, and the kids are going to hate me, and everyone is going to be miserable, right? So if I already know I'm impatient, yeah, I should learn to be more patient, but I shouldn't find something that requires me to be patient 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So then the idea that we learn and grow most in the areas where we are weakest. Ruth and folks earlier, we were talking about an idea that Steve mentioned, that in school, if a kid isn't doing well in math, right, but does really well in English and reading, the tendency of the parent and the teacher and everyone else is to really focus on getting the math improved, right? That's and we can't ignore a weakness if it's required, right? The kid still needs to graduate. I still want him to be successful. I want my child to do well. But that person is struggling and may not, and all their time is now focused on a thing that they maybe don't enjoy or really can't stand. And they're not getting to gain more skills in English because they're taking all their time and focus on the math. And so I could get to be a mediocre level of a certain thing, and then I have missed an opportunity to really grow in the thing that I'm good at and I enjoy. Because as good as I am in English, I can always improve. So that's, again, a very stark example. We can't ignore all of our weaknesses, but we could go, what else can I focus on? Can I focus on this as well? And this could come up I was mentioning the idea of college admissions. So, is it going to say a lot in my essay that I improved, I got a C- in math, but I approved? I mean, they'll look at that, right? But is it going to say a lot more if I'm less like, well, I did this actually. So I got involved in some creative writing events and I won an award for that, right? What is going to be more powerful to, and that's not to say that's the only way you can be admitted to college, right? But it's a way to say, look, here's what I'm good at. Here's what I can bring, right? Your grades can speak for themselves. Your testing can speak for themselves. You still need to work on those things, but here's where I shine. And that's going to be true in college. It's going to be true in work. It's going to be true in your life. It can be true in your life. So I feel like I'm taking up too much time. So let me move on to the other one. There's so much stuff to talk about. You can learn in an area you're weak. Of course you can, but you're going to struggle and you might be miserable. And again, you're taking that time away from someplace where you could build on your strengths. So you still want to have, we're going to use the word balance. So, well-roundedness, there's still balance, right? But we can make a choice to go, I'm going to get myself to the point I need to be here, but I'm really going to build on my strengths here, right? The third thing is, I'm not going to talk about it as much, but it's that the team, hey, it's great. If I was, independently wealthy and I could do anything I want, then it wouldn't matter. I would just do the thing I want to do. And then, whatever, like my employer needs me to do what they need me to do, right? My team needs me to be able to do everything. But that's not true in a lot of cases, right? So most well-functioning team actually has made up of people with different strengths that complement each other, right? So we get these platitudes. This I'm totally stealing completely from Marcus. So there you go. He says we hear this thing that says there's no I in team. But if you ask, when Michael Jordan is told that, he says, but there is an I in win. So if I'm really good at something and it's applicable, then I could leverage that talent. I could leverage that skill to elevate my team. I could trade things off with other team members. So I do that in my own work. I love doing presentations. I love facilitating. Many of my colleagues do not. So that's not the main thing I was hired for. But I could say, hey, I really need help with this report. Excel's not my favorite thing in the world. I can do it, but it's going to take me hours. Can you take a look at this Excel, and can I present at the funding session every week, which is what I do. So I could have that exchange. I didn't even really have to go to my manager, although if you're doing this in the real world, you may want to consider what duties you have, make sure you're not overextending yourself. But you literally can kind of demonstrate that. And if you are good at that thing, you're likely to be asked more and more often to do that thing, right? Well, hey, someone came in and we're getting more students and there's more interest. And so, hey, could you do this other presentation? That's literally what's happening right now in my work. I said, I've done some presentations well on campus. People are noticing it. And they're like, hey, Laura, can you present to this group of students? And I'm like, yes, please sign me up. But then, of course, I have to go, how much can I do? So those are things to look at. Now I want to acknowledge some concerns I have about this approach. The first one that I have, Marcus is great. And again, I'm going to put a link in the chat to talk about a particular video. He's got tons of videos, but that illustrate these points. How do I put this? So he tends to speak in really broad generalities, and has a lot of hyperbole involved in his presentations. Sometimes he dials it down a little to consider reality, but one of the things that I think about is that idea that your strengths sort of show themselves in childhood and it's the stuff you enjoy. I feel like in particular that could be ableist. So I'm going to use an example from my own life because it's the easiest one I can think of. I really loved science as a kid. Like I wanted to be the female Jacques Cousteau. Like I wanted to be a marine biologist sailing the 7 seas. And my ultimate goal was I was going to go find Nessie and prove that she existed. That was my thing. That's what I was going to do. But when I got into actual school, I really, really struggled with hard sciences, in particular, hard sciences, if you will. Biology, chemistry, statistics, all that kind of stuff. I was curious and really interested in the subject matter, but I couldn't do well in the assignments, and I didn't do well on the tests, and I had instructors that didn't help me at all, and I didn't know what the problem was because I loved it, but I couldn't do the thing. And so I gave up, right? I eventually switched and I went into psychology, and that's what I graduated with. And yes, there's some science involved in that. In fact, I took my scientific methods class concurrently with my statistics class, which is usually a prerequisite. And I passed scientific methods with an A+, and I failed statistics, which meant I didn't graduate, which doesn't usually make sense because you need the statistical, grounding in statistics in order to understand scientific methods. So I didn't think about it much, but in the process of working, I started working with people who have disabilities, students with disabilities. And I was noticing that I had a lot in common with my students who had learning disabilities, particularly in math. And it's, so we're used to thinking about dyslexia as being for letters and reading, but there's different kinds of dyslexia. So It turns out that I have dyscalculia, which is just dyslexia with numbers. And so what I was struggling with in school was not the concepts or the logic or any of that. It was that when I did my homework, I was mixing up my numbers. And when I saw a 4, I wrote a 5. And when I was trying to memorize formulas, I would get that wrong. So once I got accommodations for that, I took statistics and got a 4.0. So you could say by then, hey, I could go back into science. People do, right? People can go. But by that point, I'd been so discouraged and so, anything to do with numbers, I could do it. I used to do budgets. I actually was better at Excel. But I hated it by that point. It had such a negative association that I just couldn't get past it. Maybe if I practiced more, maybe it was more part of my job. So be aware that you might not be good at something. And this is true of any skill, right? I might start out being terrible at something because skills take practice. But we have to be aware that there might be areas, or like the shyness thing I mentioned. I used to be so shy that if they asked me to do a solo in choir, I'd have to take off my glasses because amorphous shapes and colors cannot judge me. I mean, they can, but I don't care. So because I started working in human services and helping people, and because I ended up having to do presentation as part of my work, I started to get over that. I got the practice, I got the confidence. And then I had some professional autonomy. So they let me be creative, and they let me use my natural humor and my hamminess. And it was actually something, eventually, it wasn't just presenting information, but it was actually teaching people things. And that was a lot more exciting for me. So that shy kid, you normally would say, maybe you don't go into public speaking, but you can get there from here. So I just want to say those broad generalizations, be careful of them. And then another thing is, I recognize he doesn't really acknowledge this. Many of us in working world, we don't have the luxury of just finding a job where we can play to our strengths. Like we might be in a survival job. I folded t-shirts for 2.5 weeks once, in college. They don't really let you play to your strengths unless you really like to fold laundry. And I don't now. I don't do it at all anymore. I've had enough. So, but you may be able to play your strengths even in a really well-defined position. So I could be a fry cook at McDonald's, right? And then maybe I love Excel, but I can't really incorporate that in my job. But it could be that I really love talking to people. And I'm really good at making them feel welcome and listening to their stories, but still being efficient and still getting my job done, right? If I have a good manager, hopefully they're going to recognize that strength. Maybe I'll offer to fill in for someone. They'll see that I'm good at interacting with customers. And they'll go, Laura is more valuable on the front end of the house than the back end of the house. So let's shift her to that position. It's not always possible. We don't always know what management needs or wants or all those kinds of things. But it is a way that I could try to make that job, even a survival job, more fulfilling, make me happier. I also could do things outside of work, right? I could volunteer. I could find a hobby that really builds on that strength and makes me feel better, right? So that I can still pay my rent, do what I need to do, but I'm not feeling miserable every day. One of the things you'll find if you're volunteering for this stuff, the more people know you're good at something, the more they're likely to ask you to do it. And you may find an opportunity you would never have known about if you hadn't demonstrated your strength. So it's something I encourage people to consider doing. So I want to make sure we have lots of time to talk about this stuff. And I feel like people have lots of things they want to say. So I just want to really quickly say, even finding a job where you're one of that lucky 17% that regularly gets to play to your strengths, it doesn't guarantee success. And again, I'm going to use an example from my own life. I had an amazing job with awesome coworkers, a relatively supportive manager. I got to research information. I got to do proofreading and editing. I got to coach and listen to the stories of people from all different kinds of walks of life, which I just love. I got to teach workshops that I got to design sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. It was amazing. I loved that job. And I left that job. And the reason I had to leave is that the office I was in was chronically understaffed from the beginning that I started. For 3 years, we operated sometimes 4 people down. And the management at the higher levels would never recognize this. And so the numbers we had to meet were never reduced. So even though I loved every day, I loved an aspect of what I did, the amount of stress I was going through trying to meet the expectations and also do my tasks that were harder to do, that weren't as much fun. By the end of the day, I was just done. It was having an effect on me physically. So I just want to recognize that you could find the dream job and it may still not work out. And it could be that you don't find the dream job. What I want to encourage people to think about is there something that you can do? Is there a way that you can offer your strengths, build on your strengths in your job so that people are more likely to say, let's have you do this, let's have you be involved in this. Are there projects you can join? Even little incremental changes can be really helpful. And then I just want you to think long-term. If you're not, even for people retired, it could be that you want to do something. And so consider volunteering or the hobby thing or whatever. But especially for people starting out in their career, or maybe you're burnt out right now, like what would it look like if I was going to identify my strengths, find my passion? What would it look like if I was going to talk to my manager about, maybe I can help out with this thing. Maybe I can solve this problem, and then demonstrate your strength and work from there. So I'm going to call it good. Thank you guys so much for your attention and time. It's a lot of fun. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation.